Vancouver's Transportation System by Claire and Luciano. So, a grand overview of the entire TransLink system. The official name of TransLink is South Coast British Columbia Transportation Authority. It was created in 1999 and it delivers services through contractors and operating companies and subsidiaries, such as Coast Mountain Bus Company, British Columbia Rapid Transit Company, which is the SkyTrain, and West Coast Express Limited. A good way to get to know the city's transportation system is using TransLink's trip planner, and we have a video linked below. So TransLink is basically categorized into four specific systems: Transit, SkyTrain, SeaBus, and West Coast Express. So Vancouver has a vast network of buses, trolleys, and community shuttle links to various hubs, exchanges, SkyTrain stations, and tourist destinations throughout Metro Vancouver. A good thing to know is that night bus routes usually start with N and community shuttle routes usually start with C. There are 7 bus loops in Vancouver, 1 in Burnaby, 4 in West and North Vancouver, 3 in Richmond and Delta, 4 in Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam, Port Moody, and Pitt Meadows, and Maple Ridge, and 7 in Surrey and White Rock and Langley. So TransLink provides us one of these pictures where if you zoom in, you can see that it gives us a really specific picture of the UBC loop. You can see where each specific bus stops at, so it's very helpful if you're new to the area and you want to catch a bus. You enter the date and the time range, and you get the schedule. So basically here you can see a bunch of times that the bus stops at for each bus stop. SkyTrains are divided into 3 lines: the Expo, the Millennium, and the Canada line. So the Expo and the Millennium SkyTrain lines connect downtown Vancouver with Burnaby, New Westminster, and Surrey, while Canada Line connects downtown Vancouver to the YVR in Richmond. If we look specifically at Canada Line, the highest frequency can be anywhere between 2 to 4 minutes during peak hours, and the lowest frequency can be around 20 minutes during weekends or holidays. The first train can be as early as 4:48 a.m. and the last train can be as late as 1:05 a.m. So the picture on the right shows us the 3 SkyTrain lines and where each goes and the name of each SkyTrain stop. The picture in the middle shows us the station-to-station travel time, so basically how long it takes to get from one station to another station. And the picture on the right shows us the frequency, so it gives us the time of the day and then it shows us the frequency of the SkyTrain. So here are 2 examples of how long it takes to get from one SkyTrain station to another SkyTrain station. So the green line shows us the travel time, the blue is Canada Line, the orange is Millennium Line, and the darker blue is the Expo Line. So the SeaBus is a passenger-only ferry. It crosses Burrard Inlet, connecting downtown Vancouver with the North Shore. It can seat up to 400 passengers at a time and departs every 15 minutes during the day and every 30 minutes in the evening. It has 2 terminals, so one's in downtown Vancouver and it connects with buses, SkyTrains, and West Coast Express, and one's in North Vancouver, so it connects with an extensive network of North Shore buses, and the crossing time between the 2 terminals is approximately 12 minutes. So in this picture, we can also see the travel time between the 2 terminals as well as SkyTrain travel time. So if we go from the downtown Vancouver terminal to YVR, it takes 26 minutes. The West Coast Express is a Monday to Friday commuter rail service operating during peak morning and evening periods between downtown Vancouver and Mission. On a limited basis on weekdays, a train bus service using highway coaches is also provided. So in the picture on the right, we can also see the travel times between the stations. So I was looking at Waterfront to Maple Meadows, and that takes around 50 minutes. So there are 3 fare zones in Metro Vancouver for the SkyTrain and the SeaBus, and the number of zone boundaries you cross during your trip determines the fare you're going to pay. Bus travel is a 1-zone fare all day, every day, so it doesn't matter how many zones you cross, it's always going to cost the same. You can use the fare zone map to see how many zones you will cross.
Okay, so there are multiple types of fares. So the first type of fare is a single fare. This is just like a single non-reusable ticket. that allows you to travel up to 90 minutes across the Lower Mainland by bus, C-Bus, or SkyTrain. Then there's the Fare Saver tickets, where you buy a package of 10 TransLink tickets that are same as single fare, but you just get 10 of them. And then a day pass and monthly pass are basically unlimited transit uses on all buses, SkyTrain, C-Buses, for a certain amount of time. If you get the day pass, it's obviously 1 day. If it's a monthly pass, then you get it for a month, and you get it for a calendar month. And basically, for monthly fare pass, you get 2 or 3 zone travel by bus, C-Bus, and SkyTrain services, and all bus travel is a 1 zone fare, so you don't have to pay as much. And this isn't really a type of fare, but it's more so like the mechanism that's used for fares. Compass Card, which is a reloadable fare card that works everywhere on transit in Metro Vancouver. In April 4th, actually, which is today, all fare gates are going to be closed in favor of Compass Cards. So fares continue. There's something called a Go Card, which is something that all West Vancouver students have, because it's basically a ordinary student ID card into a Go Card that basically allows students to purchase cheaper fares. You can use them to travel across Metro Vancouver by any of the 4 types of transportation systems that we have for a reduced price. So where can you buy Compass Cards and tickets? Well, there's a lot of different places. You can buy them at CVMs, which are Compass vending machines that are located at almost every single SkyTrain, C-Bus, and West Coast Express station. You can buy that at the ferry terminals and a bunch of London drugstores. And other than those, there's also a bunch of Compass retailers, which are actually shown in the light blue, the yellow luggage cases on the map. And you can also buy them online or by calling, and you can even buy them at customer service places. So there's just a lot of different places where you can buy Compass Cards. Cycling. City cycling initiatives include 4 main steps. So first, new and upgraded cycling routes. So basically making more cycling routes and upgrading them to make them even better. So you're making it a lot more comfortable and a lot safer for people to ride their bikes. Second is creating a public bicycle system. So basically a network of like public shared bicycles that are available for short-term uses for a fee. This is something that's available in cities like Singapore, something that's I think even around in Toronto if I'm not mistaken, but public bicycle systems is something that they're trying to actually start up. Third is more bicycle parking. Creating more bicycle racks and corrals on public property around Vancouver are important because then people actually are more willing to bring around bikes because there's places to put them. And the final is bike-friendly events, where event planners, promote cycling and walking by providing bike valet parking and having bike-specific events. And there's actually, specific to one of these, to the first one, which is upgrading cycling routes, there's a new project called the Canada Line Bridge Pedestrian and Cycling Connections Project, which will essentially link up Heather, Cambie, Ontario, and Kent Avenue bikeways with the Canada Line Pedestrian Cyclist Bridge between Vancouver and Richmond. So here you see a very comprehensive cycling map that, as you can see, obviously this map isn't for your use to actually know where the routes are, but it just shows that there are a lot of different routes that the BC government is trying to make very clear, where you can do certain parking, where there's one-way routes, even where there's steep hills. So it's a lot easier for bikers to actually plan. Though there isn't something like the transit planning that we showed you earlier, this is the closest thing where you can plan your own routes. Driving, which is the alternative to cycling, basically Vancouver supports a lot of efforts such as car sharing, carpooling, and ride sharing, and electric vehicles in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and make Vancouver a much more sustainable city. We're trying to make the lowest number of vehicles per capita in Metro Vancouver. And there's also things like traffic calming and safety that are trying to be implemented. Speed bumps, curb bulges, traffic circles, stop signs, traffic calming, and traffic control a lot of these mechanisms are absolutely necessary in order to ensure that traffic stays at a low. And traffic cameras and traffic count data can also be used actually. This is done in Alberta, where essentially you actually catch people with traffic cameras who are speeding and get speeding tickets that way. It's an efficient way to do it, but that's not something that's actually been implemented yet. So these are just the illustrations of the projects that we were talking about. So major road network and bike projects. In 2015, 6.3 million went to 16 road and bike projects, which is quite a significant amount of money. And since 2008, that number has been $115 million to 270 projects. There's maintenance going on for dealing with the major road network, which is around 600 kilometers. Things like pothole patching, repaving, ensuring that maintenance is done properly, snow removal, street cleaning. So anything to just make sure that that streets are safer for the everyday driver. So in terms of cycling and driving, the government has tried to make it safer and a lot more practical to do whatever you want depending on which transportation you take. So park and ride. So a park and ride is where people drive to a parking facility in order to access the transit network to continue their journey. A park and ride can be an efficient way for people to access the transit system in parts of the region with lower transit coverage and frequency. Customers who use a park and ride are typically taking longer commuting trips. So the blue pins here are managed by TransLink, and the yellow pins are managed by their respected municipalities. So challenges and problems. This is where we get to the core of the problems facing BC's transportation system. So first, aging infrastructure. So a good amount of BC infrastructure has actually been in use for more than half a century. It is estimated that around $100 billion will actually be needed to maintain proper infrastructure safety. It's really important to ensure that aging infrastructure is dealt with. This challenge is very substantial because it's not just the quality of roads that's just important for the sake of having quality roads. Aging infrastructure can mean things cave in. Aging infrastructure can mean things collapse. And that can often even mean people get injured or people can die. So it's extremely important that aging infrastructure is actually dealt with. The second is improved public transit. So within rush hours, there's often a lot of crowded buses and SkyTrains. But at the same time, there's another challenge within this because public is generally unhappy about subsidizing public transportation. The most recent example was the transit expansion referendum, which completely failed. 62% of people were against the expansion. It was just a $7.5 billion extension over the next decade. And this was actually something that was very, very highlighted in the media. If I show you just the Google link, if you search up transit referendum, the amount of CBC, there were a lot of different news links and a lot of coverage because it's a referendum and it was something that was extremely important. So another issue that has been often discussed is this idea about how there is unelected board. So the Liberal government that we absolutely love dissolved a board of elected officials in 2007, which were the ones who really managed the transportation system, TransLink, whatnot. This is problematic because we have things like school boards that we elect because these individuals should be cooperating and working with the people as much as possible because after all, the best person who understands what they need in terms of transportation are the citizens who use it themselves. So it's problematic that there is an unelected board. Another challenge, more so an issue and a hot topic right now, is Uber. So Uber has been trying to get into Vancouver and been trying to actually, make profits within our city. And this is something that's actually a hot topic. If I just go into this CBC article really quickly. Yeah, so Uber's arrival in BC is inevitable, says Transportation Minister Todd Stone. So basically a summarization of this article, It's something that, Todd Stone believes is that Uber is going to come in no matter what sometime into BC. The question is, how do you best ensure that that process is as smooth and as good as possible? That's really what the biggest discussion is right now, not whether or not Uber should actually come in. So just that's the nuance of the issue. Second slide, challenges and problems number 2. Just 3 more. So first, the resource sector expansion. So there's been sectors that have been booming due to the falling dollar. One of them has been the film industry. There's been a lot of films going on. But another is the resource sector expansion. We've seen promise of billions of dollars in investments in the energy sector in the north. But the issue is that there is little infrastructure development, and infrastructure is extremely important in transporting resources. So just another general issue is this idea about traffic. There's extreme amounts of traffic in rush hour, especially on like highways, especially in downtown, which is absolutely crazy during rush hours. Yeah, it's just traffic is an issue. The third is demographic changes. So there's 2 facets to this. First is population growth. The population is going to increase significantly in less than 10 years. 1 more million people are going to be in British Columbia. This means an increased demand for transportation and also roads that are being filled up even more. This is problematic because we already have issues with traffic, and these people are simply going to add on to that problem. But the second demographic change is actually the aging population we're seeing. Considering that we are like a country that is on a population pyramid that has, the baby boom, and also the fact that, just family sizes have gotten a lot smaller, there is a substantially aging population, and the proportion of younger people to that, or dependency ratio, is quite high. So there are a lot of seniors who are becoming a larger proportion of our population. The question then is, how do you have public transit for seniors and also disabled people in order to make it so they have the easiest, most comfortable transportation? Solutions. So the first issue, aging public infrastructure. So here's an example of where we dealt with, or what we want to deal with aging infrastructure. The 79-year-old Patula Bridge. It's estimated it'll take $100 million to create a new bridge there. And really, the biggest way of paying for this, new infrastructure, maintaining it, has been to use tolls. This is what we did for the Port Mann Bridge, but tolls cost an absolutely absurd amount. A single drive is $3.15, and like if you think that's like relatively small because the kind of transportation, the cost it takes to take a SkyTrain to is often $3. That's actually a lot of money for people who cross over through the Port Mann Bridge every day, and I mean they're already paying the gasoline fee, they already have the car fee, so it is like an absurd amount that people aren't really happy about having to pay. So the alternative of using tolls to suck up money to pay for these projects is just increasing taxes, which obviously it's something that isn't really favored with the population, seeing that we saw the rejection of the $7.5 billion expansion. So Transportation Minister Todd Stone has tried to make several appeals to the federal government for more funding. So far, hasn't worked. He's been doing this since 2014, hasn't done anything. So the second solution, improved public transportation. So how do we deal with public transportation and improving it? What we'd say is, well, the referendum was the most recent attempt at getting support for transportation, but it has completely failed. This approach hasn't worked. This is the most recent one. So right now, I'm unsure. No one is actually sure as to which methods the government is going to try to use in order to ensure that public transportation is bettered and there's proper funding. So, solution number 2, the unelected board. So the solution is obviously very intuitive, but let's look at what the BC government has been trying to actually do with the unelected board. In 2015, the mayor made an attempt to actually get say within the committee and have increasing say within the transportation board. It was denied, and honestly, there has been no actual attempt for recreating the elected board. Now the issue of Uber. Quote unquote, as I was talking about earlier, I believe it is a matter of when, not if, ride-sharing companies like Uber will be present in British Columbia. Todd Stone. So, considering that, the approach to Uber has traditionally been regulating it, ensuring it is proper. So the Vancouver Taxi Association and Passenger Transportation Board are completely fine with Uber being in British Columbia as long as they are properly regulated. This means things like insurance, this means things like background checks for drivers, vehicle inspections, and submitting to the proper laws and taxes. Next, the resource sector in the north. So while very little has come from the actual Liberal government, the BC Chamber recommended several changes. They want to create truck routes and improve transportation infrastructure for safety, 4-lane expansions on major highways in the north, and a $60 billion over 10 years to refurnish transportation to the north, which is a substantial amount, especially considering that 7.5 was immediately rejected. So yeah, after I finish all these solutions, I'll explain the quality of each one. Okay, so traffic. Honestly, we've done very little about dealing with traffic. Vancouver Mayor Gregor Robertson is proposing more and more bike lanes. Honestly, bike lanes are a great idea if people use bikes, but not many people honestly use bikes because it's just not practical for like long commutes or carrying stuff with you, and they're sometimes very uncomfortable. So by having more bike lanes, you take up possible lanes that could be used for cars. That makes traffic significantly worse. That's been the current approach. Senior and disabled transportation. So basically, we've seen this hike on prices of monthly transportation on disabled people, and also there's no public ride systems for seniors. So let's just go through all these solutions that have been happening right now and the comment on the actual effectiveness on each of them. So in regards to the aging infrastructure, so tolls and taxes, yeah, it's practical, but it's a solution that's likely not going to work. You're not going to be able to raise $100 billion worth of funds by taxing people because they're just not going to be happy about it. They're not going to want it. So that's a solution that really likely won't be able to practically work. Making the appeal to the federal government for funding might actually work. Although it hasn't worked since 2014, that's also because it's the conservative government of Harper who was very keen on not running any deficits. Trudeau has proven himself to be willing to spend money, sometimes a little bit too much, so that appeal might actually work. So I think the best option possibly would be this, and it's the most idealistic one. Ideal one. The second solution about improving public transportation, yeah, honestly, I don't really see anywhere where this can go because it's a lot easier to siphon off funds from the federal government if you make a humanitarian appeal that people will die and that like buildings will collapse. And, not that melodramatic, but like if there's an earthquake, for example, it's very dangerous to have a bridge that could potentially collapse or roads that could potentially cave in. And I think that's a more pressing issue than just making it more comfortable for people to have better transportation. So I don't think that appeal would actually work. And also, as I said earlier, tolls and taxes won't work. So it's a very bad situation. So solutions number 2, the unelected board. Yeah, the same way. I think it's also the solution's not working. There is no attempted solution. It's going to stay unelected, which is not great. Uber, here I think it's actually a very good approach to actually dealing with the issue. I think they correctly labeled the idea that Uber will eventually become president of British Columbia because it's kind of hard to avoid something that people want so much and is just a good business model. And having the regulations, though, saying that we will let you in as long as you give in to these certain regulations is a really good strategy, because in the case scenario where you struggle, don't want them in, eventually they come in, then that's the worst case scenario because you don't no longer have any leverage to actually ensure that Uber is actually regulated. But if you do this before they're actually in, then you have that leverage. It's a good solution. The resource sector expansion in the north. Honestly, I think 60 billion is a little bit too much. I think that could be reallocated to better usage. I think lane expansions and truck roads might be a decent idea. But I also think it's a good idea to, if the resource sector is so lucrative for these companies, to actually propose what a lot of these resource extraction companies do in the developing world, for example, where they themselves actually facilitate this transportation. That is possibly the most effective solution in actually dealing with that. Solutions number 3, traffic. Yeah, it's not doing anything. It's a counterintuitive solution by trying to have bike lanes where because bikes apparently take less space, so if you have a lot of bikes, then you don't have the same amount of traffic. I guess that was the analysis behind it, and it's also green, but it's really not working. It's a counterintuitive solution. It's a bad solution. Just get rid of bike lanes. That's probably the best one. Seniors and disabled transportation. Honestly, this is just wrong. It's